I'm looking at everything in combination because really I can't separate out all those different pieces of who you are as a human being. I put all those together as clues of what might be going on and what might be out of balance. And one other comment about the way I work is I also look at mind, body, emotions, and spirit. I was a psychotherapist for 15 years before I ever became a medical doctor. So looking at you on all the aspects of who you are as a human being is what I do. But we're going to really focus today on gut health because it's so central to how your body works. And we're going to talk about that in more depth as we go along. So first of all, food is information. I love this quote from Susan Lord, who's a friend and colleague. With each bite, you are sending yourself either a love letter or a Dear John letter. And you'll see why as we get farther into this discussions. But the pizza is very different from the salmon. And having said that, not everything is all good or all bad. There's some issues with salmon, like mercury toxicity, that can be an issue as well. So what I'm looking at are the nuances of how these affect your body. I love this. My advice if you want to maintain your health is avoid seconds. Meals, martinis, and board games. Doctor's orders, I'm allowed 1 cup of coffee during dinner. This is the grande and the whatever it is at Starbucks. So we talked a little bit about what functional medicine is all about, but it really is looking at all the picture, all the story behind the symptoms that you have. So I'm looking at what brought them on when they first started, because sometimes I can get a feel for what went wrong at that moment in time. We look at the triggers, so what makes it worse, what makes it better, and then what are the things that that seem to help as we go along, in terms of treatment. So it's looking at the underlying biochemical causes. Functional medicine is very steeped in science. It's all the biochemistry and the physiology that I learned in medical school, but doesn't get used often later on as a medical doctor. Functional medicine brought that back into the mix so that we're really looking at it from those standpoints. So nutrition, when I went through medical school, I had, I think, 2 lectures on nutrition. When my husband went through medical school, he had 1 lecture, and they fed them donuts and coffee. That's right, was a nutrition lecture. So nutrition really is not discussed much in medical school. It still isn't, even to this day. I just did a retreat with medical students and asked them that same question. And they're still not getting any lectures on nutrition. But nutrition is, as we said, food is information, is how your body functions. And so if we're not looking at nutrition, we're missing a big piece of the puzzle of what's going on in your body and why it's working and why it's not working. And so modern medicine has caught up a little bit. They're now looking at probiotics and fish oils and vitamin D. They're now talking about the gut microbiome. I find it's kind of funny to hear how many articles there are, or see how many articles there are on the gut microbiome. It's the new big thing. But really, the gut microbiome has been addressed with functional medicine techniques for the last 20, 30 years. So this actually isn't new. There's a lot of research around this already. But I love that it's coming into the foreground because it's an important topic. So we are all different. How your body responds to the environment is impacted with how your nutrition is, how your body is functioning overall, what your genetics are. All of those are part of the puzzle of what makes you you. I often give the example of George Burns smoked until he was past 100 years old. What was different about his genetics that allowed him to do that without getting lung cancer or other heart disease or anything like that? There was something different about him that made him able to do that. Whereas someone else, it would be a much more dire prognosis if they're smoking. So this is one example, but everybody handles things differently. There are some people who can be near environmental toxins and they skate through and it's not an issue. For someone else, it can be a significant issue and affect their cancer risk and so forth. So that's what I'm looking at when I work with someone is looking at it from all those different angles. What is food to one man may be fierce poison to others. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you on a tour of your GI tract. Doesn't that sound interesting? And what I'm going to do is with each song, I'm going to tell you what that part of your body does, and then what could go wrong. And hopefully this will help as you're thinking about your own health or your loved one's health, whoever you raised your hand for. Hopefully this will help to give you some clues of what might make things better. So first of all, the mouth. The mouth is really an important piece of the GI tract, and it's often ignored. Your dental health is very important to the rest of your health. How many of you have heard some of those studies around your dental health being an impact on your heart health? Yeah. So this is a really important piece. Not only the microbiome of your mouth, but also what your mouth is supposed to do. So when the food comes in, your teeth chew it up. Okay, so there's a mechanical breakdown, but there's also a chemical breakdown. So your saliva is working on the starches particularly and breaking those down. All of that has to happen because if you send a big bolus of food down that hasn't been chomped up like that, then there's just not as much surface area for any other part of the rest of your GI tract to deal with. So chewing is important. How many of you inhale your food? Some of you, yeah. But chewing is important. And I often will bring this up with people is that what I suggest if you're having any reflux or GI symptoms, one very simple way to help with that is to chew your food until you can't tell what it is before you swallow it. And it's a good criteria. I had one woman who had all sorts of GI symptoms, and she didn't want to do the testing and all of that sort of thing. So I said, okay, why don't we try this one intervention? We'll see what happens. And she came back 6 months later. I used to work at Canyon Ranch Health Resort. She came back 6 months later, and I was giving a talk on GI health. And she happened to be in the room with her husband. And I brought up this part, and she raised her hand. She said, I can attest that this makes a huge difference in your health. And her husband said, and I can attest that we never leave that dining room table because she's still eating. And so I asked him, do you have any problems with your GI tract? And he said, yes. I said, okay, well, let's do this for another 6 months. Do it for yourself for 6 months, and come on back and tell me how you do. He came back 6 months later and said, yeah, I have to admit, she had something there, and it made a difference for him as well. So it's a simple thing. It doesn't cost any money, and it can make a big difference for you. So something to think about as you're having those reflux symptoms. Try this and see if it makes a difference. So what can go wrong? As I said, yeah, it's not great. I love that slide. Eating too much. Portion size is important. If you're adding too much into your belly, it has trouble digesting everything. So what I often will suggest is to stop when you are no longer hungry. Don't stop when you're full. Stop when you're no longer hungry. And one way to do that is to slow down. Chewing your food will slow you down. Your GI tract is meant to work when you are not in stress. And so chewing your food will slow you down and get your GI tract to turn back on. When your body is under stress, there are certain parts of your body that get your blood flow. And that's your heart, your lungs, your brain, your muscles, so that you can run or fight or do whatever you need to do. The parts of your body that shut down during stress are your immune system and your GI tract, because you don't need to digest your lunch while you're trying not to be digested by the tiger that's chasing you. And so it makes sense. It makes evolutionary sense for your GI tract to not be the most important thing when you're trying to avoid the tiger. But if you're always eating under stress, then your GI tract is shut down. It's just not going to work as effectively. So slowing down and eating smaller portions can make a difference. Not drinking enough water. The water is part of the, churning and creating more of a bolus when the food comes down. Tooth loss can really be important. Chewing if you have tooth pain. How many of you have dealt with tooth pain where you have to be careful with your chewing? A few people? Yeah, it can make a huge difference. And so if that's an issue, please do go see your dentist. Gum infections. Cancer is becoming more and more common in the mouth and in the esophagus. So it's something to be checked for. Another something, before I go too much farther, anybody else, anybody have a question so far? Yeah.
You're supposed to drink a lot of water, but then there's a lot of talk lately about you're not supposed to drink water with your food because it dilutes the digestive process. So how do you manage drinking a lot of water without doing that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And what I would say is, if it were an ideal situation, I would suggest that you drink the water after the meal. That way you do need a certain amount of acid in your stomach, and so that could help. However, most people are fairly dehydrated. And so if I were to choose between getting hydration in or picking the right time, I'd say get the hydration in. So whenever it feels good to you, try to get some water in there. Yes?
I love big salads.
Mm-hmm.
But should I be watching my portions even on a salad?
Even on a salad.
Okay,
Yeah.
I thought so.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ignore that. Yeah.
And you may be able to tell by your symptoms. If
Right.
you eat a big salad and you don't feel well. I often say that your body will whisper, start by whispering, then it starts talking, and then it starts shouting, and then it starts screaming. And then it breaks down. And so the question is, at what point do you listen to that message? And, hopefully you listen when it's whispering. So your stomach does a few things. Now you've got this bolus of food coming down, okay? And what your stomach is supposed to do is take that bolus, close off the trap doors that are going up towards your esophagus and down toward the rest of your GI tract, and create almost like a washing machine effect. So it's got acid in there, and you need a certain amount of acid to close those two trap doors. So the issue is not so much that you have too little or too much acid. Sometimes the issue is that you've got too much acid and it's leaving the door open a little bit for reflux to come back up. So what's supposed to happen with that acid is it kills off the bacteria, the yeast, the parasites, all that stuff that's on your food. It's one of your mechanisms that protect you from the world outside. Second, it helps to break down your starches and your proteins. And so it is a really important part of the GI tract. Where things can get out of balance is if you have too little or too much hydrochloric acid. Now, in regular medicine, they look at somebody who has reflux and they automatically put them on a proton pump inhibitor or something like that, H2 blocker, that gets them to decrease their stomach acid levels. When I do nutritional testing on those people, I find that they have significant nutritional deficiencies because you need that acid to help break down your foods and to pull the vitamins and minerals and amino acids out of that food. And so acid has a role. Our bodies are miracles of engineering. And so that acid is there for a reason. Where the problem becomes is if you have that trap door that's going from the stomach to the esophagus, if that's a little bit open, then any food you have will come up and create irritation of the esophagus. And that can be dangerous if it continues for a long time. You can actually get cancer from that. So I don't suggest that you run out and get some supplements for stomach acid and start taking it. That's not the goal. What I do is testing. I figure out, do you have too much? Do you have too little? And then we treat appropriately. And the other piece to that is I wouldn't use stomach acid supplements until we clear up the GI tract and you have healthy tissue in there. And then we add the acid and the stomach starts working correctly. So any questions about that? Because I know that was a lot right there. You're good? Okay. So some of the testing, I can look at H. pylori as one of the bugs that can sit in your belly and create some inflammation. H. pylori, it's interesting, research is coming out that is talking about how it has some benefits as well. So, there's always that mixture. Heidelberg test lets me know if you have too much or too little acid. Endoscopy is where they put that tube down and check the health of your esophagus and the stomach. And I often send people for that if I'm worried about it and want to, just make sure they're not getting into trouble with that inflammation. So your pancreas. So now the food is well, churned up, and it looks like mush, basically. And it starts coming through the stomach and into the small intestines. And what's supposed to happen at that point is your pancreas is supposed to be turned on to send out some chemicals that help to break down the food so that you can pull out the fats, the carbohydrates, and the proteins from it. So that's what it's supposed to do. It's also supposed to send out some insulin so that your sugar levels are well maintained. Now, the thing is though, if you have inhaled your food, your stomach didn't get the message, your pancreas didn't get the message, nothing works quite as efficiently farther down the line. So that again comes into, taking that extra few minutes and chewing your food. I find when it comes to pancreatic enzymes, I do use them to help bolster somebody if they're having some problems with their digestion. What I find though is it's usually not the underlying problem. So I'll use supplements for that, but if I'm still using them a year from now, I didn't fix the problem. Because usually the pancreas is pretty hardy. And if we fix the other things that are going on, the pancreatic enzymes will kick in on their own again. So you don't need that for the long term.
Is there ever any individuals talking about people being different who just don't produce certain enzymes? I mean, it's part of their.
Yeah.
And then a supplement is a lifetime requirement, just like insulin might be for somebody who's diabetic?
It can be, yeah, it can be. And I do have some people that are like that, but I do the testing to know. Yeah, the way I put it is I don't want to be another doctor that throws a dart at the wall and hopes that it sticks. I want to know what your particular problems are, and then we fix those problems. And I have a lot more success with that because I know exactly what we're treating. So what I would do is if you were having that issue, we would clear up the gut, make it healthy again, and then come back around and test it. And if your pancreatic enzymes are still low, even though everything else looks that healthy, then yeah, you may be one of those people who needs it for the longer term. So it does happen. And so what can go wrong? Well, too few pancreatic enzymes are doing their job, as we just mentioned. Diabetes comes into play with the pancreas. Diabetes type 1 type 2 are completely different mechanisms of how they're working. So we look at that in acidic environment in the intestines. So if the acid has come in and has not been neutralized by the pancreatic enzymes, then that acidic environment can cause problems in the small intestines as well. So then the small intestine, oh yes?
What's pancreatitis?
Oh, pancreatitis? Pancreatitis is when you have an inflammation of the pancreas. So it can be an infection. The most common cause for that is too much alcohol really is hard on the pancreas. But that's not the only thing that can cause pancreatitis. And I say that because I particularly remember a person in the hospital who never drank anything and had pancreatitis and was labeled by a lot of people that she must be an alcoholic. And so I bring that up. It isn't always that. But it is one of the things we look at. Anybody else?
Well, with pancreatitis, don't you have to watch your intake of fat? Isn't that one of the causes?
Intake of fat is more of an issue with the liver and the gallbladder. So yes, in the sense that if you don't have the pancreatic enzymes to break down your fats, then that could be, causing you some symptoms. But when you think about fat, it's more likely the gallbladder is having some problems. Yeah. The gallbladder is attached to the liver, and it sends out bile in order to help you emulsify and break down your fats. And so, yes.
Is that where most nutrient absorption happens? And do you know when that's going wrong? By any chance?
Or how do you know?
Yes, I do, yeah. It's right here in the small intestines. The small intestines are probably the most important. Is really smart. It has a brain of its own because everything you eat is a foreign object. So it has to figure out what's friend and what's foe. And it does a really good job of that most of the time until things get a little disordered. And I'll show you this in some other slides what that is. But it's filtering out. It's filtering out the problems in your food, the bacteria, yeast, all of that. It can even filter out, if the food is bad, it'll figure out, when you get symptoms from food poisoning, it's because your immune system has kicked right in to try to kill that off. 60 to 70% of your immune system is in your gut. So it really does have a brain of its own. But the thing is, your immune system is connected all through the body. So if your GI tract is inflamed, then you're going to get inflammation elsewhere. And when I asked you at the very beginning, do you know of anybody who has muscle aches and headaches and fatigue and things like that? This is part of the reason for that, because if your GI tract is inflamed, you are inflamed. And fixing this often will fix those other issues. It's not the only cause of muscle aches and headaches, but it is one of the causes that is often missed. So it's important to bring it up. So when this doesn't work so well, you're not able to bring in your nutrients. And those nutrients are there for a reason. Again, our bodies are miracles of engineering. It has figured out how to take the juice out of the food and create health in your body. So if you're not getting in your vitamins, your B12 and your niacin and your vitamin C and your amino acids and your fats and all of those things, every cell of your body is working at lower capacity than it needs to. So this is a really important piece of what's going on in a body. And so that's why oftentimes people will talk about the GI tract as being so central. Yes?
If you have a healthy GI tract, is there a need to take vitamins?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
So if you take vitamins on a healthy GI tract, is that bad?
It depends on which ones you take. So there are a lot of vitamins that are water soluble, which means if you're taking more than you need, it just flushes out and you have very colorful urine or stool. For others, if they're taking fat soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K, those can build up because they land in your fat cells, and so that can become toxic after a while. So they can. Now, even water-soluble vitamins can get you into trouble in certain circumstances. There are some B vitamins that can cause neuropathy if you're taking too many, and so forth. So, yeah. So it's a mixture of it, and that's what I like about the testing, because I can see if there's an issue there.
Right.
And if your body is healthy, it'll show up on the testing, and you don't need supplements. When I'm treating people for this sort of thing, I may have somebody on a lot of supplements because I'm focused on getting that cleared up. But once they're cleared up, my goal is not for them to be on a whole bunch of supplements. Right. With the testing, we'll figure out what their body needs more of than others, and then we can be much more targeted in what we use. Yes.
Are probiotics included in supplements? Is that part of what you're talking about?
Yeah. Probiotics are part of it. It used to be that we thought if you gave probiotics, your GI tract would have the good bacteria. We know so much more now than we used to, because any probiotic supplement you use only has at the most maybe 10, 12 different types of bugs in them. But there are a lot more different varieties of bugs that your body needs. And so probiotics is one piece of it, but what they're finding now is that food is even more important. The types of foods you eat can give you natural probiotics, and those stick a little bit better.
What are some of those?
Some of those are a lot of the fermented foods can do that. So kefir and pickles, even, things like that, can make a difference in terms of making a healthy flora in there. But it's actually not just that. What they found was that just a healthy diet adds the good bacteria into your belly. yeah. And soil-based probiotics are coming into the forefront because, it used to be that we got a lot of these probiotics from the soil. And now the soil is not part of our lives. We have very sanitized lives. And so soil-based probiotics is a sort of a new rung of probiotics that
I
are
take
now
them,
being
they're
used.
fabulous.
Yeah. So probiotics can help, but they don't do what we used to think they would do. We used to think that they would colonize in your belly and forevermore your belly would be healthy. And it just doesn't work that way. Your diet needs to be healthy in order for your belly to be healthy. And that can happen really fast. The gut flora shifts really quickly when you get a healthier diet. Somebody had a question?
Not to make this all about me, I apologize.
It's supposed to be interactive, Jensen.
If it's
I
you,
just-
it's also other people in the room, I
Yes.
can guarantee it.
I just got my blood work done and I was extremely low in B12.
Mhm.
So is that because I'm eating the salads, the big salads too fast?
So there's a couple of potential reasons for B12 to be low. One is that if you have low stomach acid, you need a bit of acid to be able to pull out or start what's called intrinsic factor in your stomach to get the B12 out of the food. So that might be part of it. Second part of B12 is that toward the end of your small intestines, the second half of the B12 needs to be released. And so there might be something going on down there. Third reason for B12 deficiency is that you may not be eating enough meats and things like that have B12 in them. And the fourth is a problem with small intestines where you're just not it's not pulling into the rest of your body.
So I get B12 shots almost every week.
Do you?
And, yeah, and they really make a huge difference. I know a lot of people will say, oh, it's a lot of malarkey. I can tell you it really helps with stamina, and if you're low in the Bs,
Mm-hmm.
it's a good way to boost.
Yeah, and there's also something that is genetic. It's called a methylation problem, and it's another thing that I often will check for people. Is if you have a methylation problem, then you don't take in your B vitamins in particular, but there's other vitamins as well that just don't work very well, and so we have to use different types of vitamins to get those in. And that is also related to stress. If you find that you tend to hold on to stress longer than maybe the other people around you, it may be a methylation problem, and so we look at that as well.
Can you correct the methylation problem, or is that?
You can, yeah.
Define methylation.
Methylation is one of the chemical processes in your body that it's pretty ubiquitous in your body. It does many things. One is it makes new DNA. So obviously that's kind of important. Second, it helps you to break down your estrogens, which is another important. If you or someone you know has really lumpy breasts, you may have a problem with methylation. Or if you have fibroids, that sort of thing, you may have a problem with methylation because it's a clue that you're not breaking down your estrogens very well. Third, it helps you to break down your stress chemicals, particularly epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. So again, if you have a methylation problem, you may feel stress more deeply than someone else might. Just a few minutes left, okay.
Yeah.
Can you eat too many vegetables where you're stripping your body of its nutrients?
Too many vegetables and stripping your body of its nutrients. I mean, what I would say about that is if you're eating any one thing a lot, you're probably not getting the full complement of nutrients that you could be getting. The other thing, maybe you're thinking about fiber, too much fiber.
No, more so with, a lot of the different cleanses that are, kind of in vogue now. I just wonder if if you're doing a lot of cleanses, can you be stripping your body of some essential nutrients where you're getting, if you're getting over the amount of certain elements in the vegetables, if you can actually be, counterproductive in that area.
Well, what I see with the cleanses can help in the short term. A lot of times people do say that they feel better, but it can only go so far. It only goes to your large intestines, and so maybe I'll go to that. Well, I guess I'll skip all of that. But it goes to your large intestines, and so it may clear out that. But really what's the more important piece is this part. It's the small intestines. So if you're only getting cleanses, it'll just come back because this part isn't being dealt with. So cleanses are good for the short term, but I don't think of them as the be-all and end-all and the cure-all. I only have a couple of minutes, okay, so let me be, I'll stick with this one slide and talk about some of these things. So in terms of inflammation, here's some of the things that can go wrong in your belly. One is you can have food sensitivities. Food sensitivities are really important. There's several ways that you can have a food sensitivity. One is an allergy, like the peanut allergy that everybody thinks about. That one is an IgE reaction. But there's two other parts of your immunoglobulin system that get into play when you're talking about food sensitivities. And that is your IgG system and your IgA system. IgG is the part of your immune system that is a slow reaction. So you could eat a food and then not have a reaction to it until a week later or so. You know, it could be a couple of days, could be immediately, or it could be a week later. So those are really hard to figure out with a food diary. So I do testing around that. Second is IgA. IgA is reactions in your mucous membrane. So that's your GI tract and your nasal passages. So if you tend to have a lot of postnasal drip and things like that, or chronic sinus congestion, it may be something like this going on. And again, I can test that and see what's going on. And it can sometimes surprise you. I had a fellow that had, chronic fatigue, really bad. Been to a lot of doctors, wasn't figuring it out. Then he came to me, we did the testing, and what we found is he had a dust allergy. And getting dust out of his environment made a huge difference. It was literally night and day. And so would I have expected that? No, not really, because the symptoms weren't typical of a dust allergy, but it was so ubiquitous in his environment. He was living in an old house, working in an old building. It was just all over the place, and he couldn't escape it until we focused on it, and then it got out. Dysbiosis is that problem with the gut microbiome that we're talking about. It's just a term that's used in terms of, there are certain bacteria in our body that we live in symbiosis with, where it helps us, we help them. And there's other bacteria that we live in dysbiosis with, where it doesn't help us, it just eats our food and creates inflammation in our bodies. And then leaky gut. How many of you have heard the word leaky gut? Yeah. And it's basically what happens is when your body when your GI tract is healthy, your GI tract is lined with all these little cells, just one cell thick, and they're connected to each other with something called a tight junction. Let me see if I can pull up a picture of that. Is it tight? Okay. So tight junction, so basically what happens is when you have a lot of inflammation, those tight junctions are no longer tight. And food can get through before it's been really chopped up and well disseminated. And so then when that happens, it creates bigger inflammation. You start getting food sensitivities to everything. It doesn't mean that you're allergic to everything. It just means that your GI tract is out of balance, and so it needs to be healed up a little bit. And a lot of times that will just go away. All of those food symptoms will go away. So we did exactly what we needed to do today. As I said, I wanted to make sure that we covered your questions more than we covered the slides. Are there any last questions that anybody has? And I'm happy to be here afterwards if you have more questions. Yeah.
You didn't touch on, but this is leading to it, I'm sure, gluten sensitivity and how that plays a role.
Gluten sensitivity is a really important thing. There's often the talk about celiac disease. And for the longest time, people only talked about celiac disease when it came to gluten sensitivity. But that's way out on this side of the spectrum. There's a lot of people who have problems all along that spectrum, from a mild issue with gluten to a large issue with gluten. That can cause inflammation. And gluten's interesting. It can cause inflammation in your GI tract, but some people have no GI symptoms with that. Actually, some people have no GI symptoms with any of this. It'll be elsewhere. I know plenty of people who have chronic depression, anxiety from gluten sensitivity. And so it's one of the things I look at if somebody comes in with those issues. But yeah, it's a big issue. Yeah, and we could test that as well.
I don't know if this is very specific to each individual, but is there like a general diet you would recommend that would kind of just give someone a cleanse and clear everything out? That's it's almost like putting my dog on a limited ingredient diet, right, to check for allergies and things like that. Is there anything you would recommend?
Well, there are certainly cleanses out there that you can use that are, certainly more restrictive in clearing out. What I do say, and I have another talk on this type of health. And on one of those slides, I have a list of all the diets that are out there. And oh my gosh, it's all small writing. It's 5 million diets, including the cookie diet is on there. And so there's all those types of things. And what I say is, diets are complicated. And then on the next slide, I say, unless they're not. When you look at the research around food health, it really comes down to one very simple prescription. When you fill your plate, fill it mostly with vegetables and have some fruit. And if you're going to have meat, have it be a side dish. So don't make it the main thing, make it the side dish, make the main thing your vegetables. And if you kind of stick to that, you're eating a fairly healthy diet. And it fits with a lot of the diets that are out there, and most of the research backs that up. Then we can have all sorts of conversations about what kind of fats you should add and all that sort of thing. But I think if you stick with that simple prescription, it'll get you a really long way.